morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing okay. Continuing our appreciation course here. Like I said in an email this morning, if you have concerns or questions about anything, do send a line. Try to reach out a week every week to see how you guys are doing. Um, this video will probably be a multi-parter because there's a kind of a lot to talk about. We talk about jazz and then jazz in lowercase, or at least in quotation marks, and what I mean by that. Very influential style of music, African American invention, really influential in the early part of the 20th century. Hits its heyday in the years of World War II or after World War II, and then it kind of, as far as our popular music goes, kind of declines in the 50s. Although it's still around today. It's not like, the jazz didn't disappear. But as a popular music, it was heyday was in the World War II era, in the 40s. Like I said, it's an American music, African American invention. And it is an African American invention. We're going to run into some people today who thought otherwise, but they were incorrect. There were antecedents to this kind of music, ragtime. Ragtime isn't jazz. It's a style of music all on its own. We'll talk about what makes jazz distinct as opposed to ragtime. But when we talk about ragtime, we usually think of Scott Joplin, who was an African American composer, late 19th century, early 20th century. He died in the early years of the 20th century. But he was popularized ragtime. It was a very influential kind of music. What this music has, it's usually piano music. With Joplin anyway, you have a very steady left hand, like a bass and chords, and then you have a syncopated right hand melody. It is all written out, and there are distinct forms of ragtime. There's it's almost like a rondo kind of form where you have the return of the theme coming back. But it's not improvised. So what makes jazz distinct is that one of the elements is that improvisation. So ragtime is an antecedent. The other is the blues. We'll talk about a little bit about the blues today. Blues is a style of music born on in the Mississippi Delta, places like this, among African American community. Usually blues dealt with the problems of everyday life. So having the blues was essentially being sad, being depressed, and so a lot of these blues songs, these early Delta blues songs, dealt with the struggles of sort of post-slavery, living under that system, all kinds of depressing kind of elements. Working too long hours. You have a lover who died, or family who's died, lovers who have jilted you. These kind of things show up in the blues quite often. We'll talk a little bit about the blues form. There are some musical elements that make the blues distinct, but both of these elements are antecedents of jazz. Blues really does influence jazz. Ragtime, I suppose you could say, the syncopation, although it's its own distinct music. And so, of course, the blues is just as well, but blues really, a lot of jazz musicians draw upon blues elements. How jazz works. Well, like I said, improvisation is key, which means you make it up on the spot based on certain parameters, usually harmonic progressions, sometimes pre-selected melodies, and you riff on the melody. But making it up on the spot as opposed to having it all pre-written and rehearsing it and playing it as is. I have a name. The name changed when you had jazz bands show up in New Orleans in the 1890s, early 1900s. They were sometimes called the jazz band, JASS, and then later becoming jazz. And so we have to talk about the name, what it meant. A lot of critics of the time, early 20th century, complained that jazz had this sexual orientation. There's a racist element here because it was an African American music, so it was seen as degenerate. It also had this sexual connotation because it was dance music. A lot of it was dance music, and the dances had a lot of sort of close contact between male and female. So among the sort of puritanical white upper classes, this was something to avoid. Jazz also, the term itself had a sexual connotation. I can't say the word, what it meant, because this YouTube video will probably get deleted. But you can probably guess what it is. It meant the F word. Jazz meant the F word. It was a slang for that term. So when you had, guys talking about, I'm going out and, jazzing tonight, they weren't really talking about dancing. They could be talking about dancing, but they may have been referencing other nighttime activities. So it had this sexual connotation from the beginning. One of the main early practitioners of this jazz style, this new style, the 1890s, early 1900s, was a man named Buddy Bolden. He was a trumpet player, probably could not read music. There's no surviving music of Bolden's, but he was he played by ear. A lot of jazz musicians did play by ear initially. But he invented something called the Big Four. The Ken Burns documentary on jazz talks about this. It's very interesting. The Big Four was a kind of march riff. So think of a march. So like bum, 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 like the Sgt. Stripes Forever. John Philip Sousa. We didn't talk about Sousa, but we maybe should talk about Sousa. But you have, traditionally in marches, you have kind of a boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Very straight, very square. The Big Four is a syncopation that comes on the fourth beat. So instead of boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, you have instead boom, chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, ba-bum, bum. Chick, boom, chick, boom, chick, ba-bum, bum. That ba-bum, bum is the syncopation. And the Big Four, you have the cymbal crash and the bass drum happening on beat 4. When you emphasize, again, syncopation, when you accent normally unaccented beats, you have syncopation. So this gave the music kind of a kick. And so you had riffed versions of the melody. They might take a tune as popular as Stars and Stripes Forever, and instead of bum 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 bum, it might be bum 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 ba ba da ba boo ba doo ba doo ba doo ba doo boo. So you swing it a little bit, right? Makes it a little more interesting. I apologize for the singing. But so it was a way of jazzing up your original material. The blues format, this is kind of handed down from blues form. We'll talk about the blues when we talk about Blind Lemon Jefferson in a little bit. But blues format involved two things. One, the lyrics followed kind of an AAB format. So you'd state a lyric and then you'd repeat it, and then you'd have like a sum. You have like a B, which is a different kind of lyric. And this fit into what we call the 12-bar blues format. So this is usually use 3 chords. There's a great video on YouTube. The Axis of Awesome does the 4 chords. All these rock songs use these 4 chords. Blues format uses 3 chords, usually. There's some variation. But the tonic chord, what we call the 4 chord, or the subdominant, and then the dominant, and you arrange those in such a way in 12 bars. I'm not going to get, this isn't a theory course, I'm not going to get too technical here, but it lasts for 12 bars, or 12 measures. And then you repeat it. So it's a way of sort of stabilizing your lyrics, and then of course you can improvise upon that set 12-bar harmonic progression. So I'll link the Axis of Awesome video. I mean, that's popular music. A lot of songs you like might follow, in this case, 4 chords, 1, 4, 5, 6 in that case. Sometimes it substitutes a 2 for a 4. Again, what does that mean? You might be thinking, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but it's the chords of a scale. We break them up by number based upon based upon the intervals of the scale. So again, I don't have a piano here. Unfortunately, to show you, if we were in class, I would break all this down. But blues format is a 12-bar system. Talk about the blues. It's not jazz per se, but blues is its own form. But we'll talk about how the blues kind of manifests itself in jazz. I want to talk about Blind Lemon Jefferson. Was an African-American singer. He was born blind, 1892 to 1929, had a relatively short life. This is the only surviving picture of Blind Lemon Jefferson. More influential, I think, after his death than he was at the time. At least as far as his influence upon later musicians. He has a very popular song called Black Snake Moan, and it is set in this AAB format. I'm going to post this to the YouTube channel. Do have a listen. The Black Snake Moan here, I mean, what does that mean? Again, here's the sexual connotations. The black snake is slang for his genitalia. So it's this Black Snake Moan. It's about sexual desire. So you have a lot of this coming out in early blues music. Certainly in jazz, there's sometimes sexual connotations, explicit sexual connotations, or maybe even veiled sexual connotations in the music. So that's Black Snake Moan. I'll post a link to that on the channel. We talk about jazz itself. Jazz was a popular music. I've mentioned this already. The early 20th century, it sort of hit the stands, so to speak, with about 1917 with a song by this fella, Nick LaRocca, 1889 to 1961. Was a cornetist and a band leader. Organized and ran the original Dixieland Jazz Band in New Orleans. The Dixieland style was associated with New Orleans jazz. So Nick LaRocca, if you can see here, he's not African American. He's white European background. This would manifest itself in some comments he would make, claiming that jazz, he said, was a white man's invention. It wasn't really an African American invention. It was too sophisticated for that. So, I mean, he was wrong. It is an African American invention, but he believed that it was not. So he's not the only person to do this. Tiger Rag was this hit tune, 1917, was released on phonograph. So we have a transformation here in the American popular music scene. In the 1890s, the popular music industry was sheet music. So you printed, these major companies in New York City would hire, composers and then these song pluggers to sort of pitch the songs to publishers or to buyers. And so the industry was sheet music, and you would go to the music store and you would purchase the sheet music, and you'd have your own band or you'd take it home and play it. You had to make your own entertainment. This changes in the early 20th century with the recording industry. So they released phonograph records, first cylinders, and then, of course, have phonograph records. If you ever seen a phonograph, if you crank it up, it sort of runs itself. You have to wind the coil, and you can play records for so many minutes. And these songs were relatively short, so the record wouldn't die down. So this is a major hit as far as its first jazz hit. The other popular music that was hot on record was actually opera. It was Enrico Caruso, so singing operatic arias, a very famous operatic tenor of the early 20th century. So you had opera, one time kind of a popular music too, and then you had jazz, of course, the new form. So Tiger Rag, I'll post a link to this. It is the Dixieland style. We talk about the Dixieland style. What you might hear is that you have kind of multiple melodies at once. So what's going on here is sometimes called collective improvisation. You've got a kind of a set theme, and then you have the clarinet and the trumpet and kind of improvising the tune together, making a very sometimes cacophonous sound, certainly a thick textured kind of music. That was the original Dixieland Jazz Band. That's some of the Dixieland style. You have this collective improvisation, as well as the trombone, tailgating, because they used to sit on the back of wagons and then on the tail of wagons and then just because the instrument's so large, has the long slide. You might take somebody out with a slide. So tailgating, that style, that slide, used in jazz quite often. So that's Nick LaRocca. I'm going to run out of time here. So I'm going to pick up with, I think Louis Armstrong's next. No, Ferdinand Jelly Roll Morton. Okay, so we'll talk about Jelly Roll Morton here in a little bit. So see you in a second.